Hello, everyone. I'm Monica Duran, and I'm a customer success manager here at WorkRamp. WorkRamp is a leading end-to-end training platform for educating employees and customers at top companies like Zoom, Square, Slack, and Bitly. Now, with us today, we have Tony Roma, who is the voice of Bitly. He's built customer education programs from the ground up, including customer onboarding, in-app walkthroughs, and product documentation. We're thrilled to have Tony walk us through customer education at Bitly and share learnings from building and scaling these programs. All right, so today we will be covering 4 topics. Tony will be telling us about his philosophy on creating public-facing material. Then from there, we will discuss what customer product education looks like at Bitly. Our third topic, we will dive into what to consider when building out your customer education program. And then lastly, we will cover how to go about implementing your program. Okay, so as always, for everyone joining us today, if you have any questions, be sure to drop them in the Q&A box and we will touch on them at the end of the webinar. All right, so for our first topic today, I would love to kick things off with learning a little bit more about you, Tony, and your background in customer education.
Sure. Well, first, thank you for asking me to join you, and thank you for Rachel at WorkRamp for setting this up, and for Katie at Bitly for making introductions and getting this going. So my background, most writers in general are generalists. And so when in any position you're in, people tend to tap that skill. So I've been a project manager. I've been in customer service a lot. I've done QA testing. I've taught preschool while QA testing and juggling 2 jobs at the same time. And that's been in Fortune 500 companies, in the public sector, and in tech startups mostly, which is where I really enjoy working. And through that work, I've come to video work and UX work, which I really love. And I get to do that a lot here at Bitly. My role at Bitly, I would say I'm one of the voices at Bitly. We have great teams across the board who help us get this content up and running that we work on. I'm part of the product team. I am the only writer on the product side. And we have one designer on the product side too, and we work closely. I do the product copy and the product documentation. And I collaborate across the board with many teams. So marketing, enablement, support, our project managers, our product managers, and the product team, and our engineers. It's a really great place to be because collaboration works so well, and I work with fantastic people. And we just, we get things done. And sometimes that means just doing something, sort of that attitude of asking forgiveness rather than permission. And, we do that here and there on the edges, but we really are, focusing the same direction, and that helps a lot.
All right. Sounds like you have your hand in a lot of things. Yeah. And also doing QA testing and being a preschool teacher. You kind of have the spectrum of a lot of things that you've done, which is great. So during our prep call, I loved hearing about your philosophy around tone and voice, which I think is very relevant and important, and something we should keep in mind as building out public-facing material. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Sure. Well, Tiffany Fowle, who's our content manager over at Bitly, she's put a lot of work into shaping our voice, which has helped us all kind of understand the framework and be consistent in how we talk about Bitly. The voice is based on the company's mission, who we are, what our message is, and it provides that structure for all our customer interactions. And that's any communication, email, documentation, video, the app copy, and of course our marketing. Now tone works together with voice, and it changes depending on the situation. So, in marketing, we're pitching to someone, we're introducing Bitly to them, we're getting them excited about it. It's a different kind of relationship than when you have a customer now and you're establishing more of a partnership with them. And how you speak to them, it can become more personable to encourage or communicate or celebrate with them. John Saito over at Dropbox, I love reading his blogs. He has written about copy strategies, and he always keeps in mind that he's communicating with another human being. And that's something I always tell people who I'm collaborating with or training, about training them on communications, is to encourage them to imagine the customer sitting across the table from them and, think about that situation. How might they be feeling? How would you address the situation? How would you talk to them if they were sitting right here? And to try to communicate with them in that way. And then, thinking about it situationally, you'll have something like an error message where you've disrupted their workflow. You want to get them back into that momentum. So how do you, tell them what has happened, what they can do about it, and how they move on so that they can continue and not get too caught up in that, and do it in an encouraging way. In the same way, I've sat in customer interviews or sat with customers using a product who get excited about completing a task or accomplishing something. And I think that rewarding them in the app, so, congratulations, you did this. This is awesome. You're on your way. All those kinds of messaging, you can be a good coach and a colleague to them. And it impacts the relationship with your product.
Right. I think one of the things that you touched on when we last spoke was about accomplishing those tasks and then celebrating them. And then that kind of encourages them to do more exploring, which I think is huge, because I think a lot of people in just many fields, like just driving adoption anywhere you can and learning is so big. And the fact that you took it a step further by noting that just by encouraging them helps to prompt them to want to explore and do more. And I think that's great. And then the other thing you mentioned was just like talking to them as if you were speaking to them in person. I think many times, especially on video, it's so hard to come across very natural. And so kind of having that tip of just pretending somebody's right in front of you and you're just speaking to them, because a lot of people definitely come off robotic, like they're just reading off of the script.
Yeah.
So, all right. So then for our second topic, building customer product education at Bitly, the first question I wanted to start off with was, why is customer education important at Bitly?
I think the biggest piece of that is that people have preconceptions about Bitly. They've used it as a free product to shorten their links. And even the way they think about their links tends to be a fleeting thought, like, okay, create our link, add the UTM parameters, we'll get our metrics on it later, and not really recognizing how important those links are. That's something we really try to convey, and increase the understanding of the value of customizing links, viewing the link metrics, scaling communications, which you can do with Bitly on a huge level by integrating with other products. It's really a whole new world for a lot of people. Large companies recognize this, and we're really making headway into helping smaller companies and mid-sized companies understand that. By helping people understand it, they get excited about the possibilities of what they can do, and get creative about how they can use those links.
Yeah, definitely. Any like customer education, like having them understand the importance of the product, I think is huge and definitely something important to touch on always. So then what would you say are the foundational pillars that make up customer education at Bitly?
In a lot of ways, we're defining these constantly and redefining them. I think the main thing with any process of customer education is charting a journey, tell a story, help people understand, in our case, that awareness of how important links are, that a personalized, customized link will get more clicks than one that isn't customized. There are lots of bit.ly links in the world. We've all seen them, and that's great brand recognition for us. And we want to help people understand that those links can be just as recognizable and trusted for them through that customization. Again, empowering customers to accomplish their goals, by assisting them and encouraging them in understanding and guiding them and how to implement these things. And for me, it's really about having a service mindset. It's easy to disconnect, as you were saying, from, when you're staring at a screen. It's like suddenly you're distant.
Right.
Even as I speak to you right now, I have to, it's like, okay, if Monica were sitting right here, let's have that discussion as opposed to that distance. Yeah.
You mentioned having a service mindset. Could you elaborate a little bit more on what that is and how you kind of hone in on that mindset after kind of spending hours looking at a screen?
It's a constant reminder of, putting yourself in the customer's shoes and thinking about something I always do is not assume the customer knows anything. You know, when you're on the back end of a product, you have a lot of knowledge that customers don't know. You know, put all of that aside, erase it all from your mind, and pretend you know nothing, and start from there. Because, you know, for the customers who do have some knowledge, they'll skip ahead without any problem. And for
Mhm.
those that don't, you're covering those bases and you're getting them on board.
Got it. No, I think that's a great tip, definitely. So, what does customer product education look like at Bitly?
Yeah, so we've always had good communications through email, through the marketing team, through our end product messages and emails, and you know, we've built up some video too, from many different groups. And our customer support team, of course, uh, gives us kind of grist for the mill in that they can identify what customers need to know, what the problems are, what do we need to address, and then help, you know, build those knowledge base videos, and the knowledge base articles themselves. They do a lot of work on that end, and it has to be hands-on. So again, the enablement team uh, trains employees so that they can work with customers. And then we have this amazing training team that works with customers directly through trainings on our advanced plans, through Bitly learning webinars, some of which we have recorded on our help center. So you can watch those there and learn about the product through those as well.
Nice. So, would you say, like, when you do customer training, is it kind of like a hybrid where you direct them to your help center to watch these videos and get started, or do you kind of kick things off with like a one-on-one type of situation? Or how does that work over at Bitly?
Yeah. For example, for our enterprise plans, you know, it's a high-end sales to customer success handoff. I'm sure you have similar experiences at WorkRamp, similar workflows. And yeah, we have this team that, you know, they do the one-on-one, they do the introductions, they do constant check-ins and trainings, and then we'll record some of these webinars for everyone to view. They
Hmm.
really do an amazing job. Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, so then how did you prioritize the initiatives, activities, and programs when building Bitly's product education framework?
Yeah, when I came in, we had the opportunity to start some new initiatives from scratch. So kind of redo things that we were doing. There was already a lot going on in that company, in the company at that time, particularly introducing these self-service plans that we hadn't had before, where people can upgrade on their own and start using some of these other features. Um, we had a UX researcher, pardon me, who did incredible work, was gathering useful insights. You know, we were updating our product in major ways, and we've implemented new tools like WorkRamp and Pendo to help us accomplish those goals. Um, you know, we always advocate for customers while meeting company goals. So that helps us prioritize. It's like, where is that balance? What do we need to do next?
Hmm.
Um, and really defining the process and redefining the process constantly. Ask questions, share ideas, getting buy-ins from executives and cross-functional teams. We do all that really well at Bitly. I really work with amazing people, so it's easy to do in some sense.
Right. So when you're asking questions, is that more for like internal, like you're asking questions internally, or is this to like the customers to kind of get a feel for how everything's going with them as well as you're building out these programs?
Both.
Yeah.
Yeah, uh, of course, through customer interviews and observations, you ask those questions, but also, you know, getting an understanding of different perspectives within the company itself has a big impact.
Hmm. Just a quick question actually on that. Do you have any questions, any like particular questions that you do ask the customers to kind of get a feel for how everything's going?
Hmm. For my part, because I'm taking the information they're sharing and then somehow repackaging that into helpful information, I really pay attention to the words they use. You know, what are they
Hmm.
calling this feature or that feature? How do they understand how it works? Um, So that aspect of what language they use is huge for me, and asking clarifying questions around some of those things can really help you understand how customers are using a product and
Right.
how they think about a product.
Wow, that is super helpful. I'm thinking about that because that's definitely something I think Katie just put in here, language is essential, so important. I love that because it's definitely something that you do hear. Like people will like refer to something else than what it's supposed to be. And do you correct them or do you kind of like guide them towards what it's supposed to mean or do you kind of know what they're referencing and then just kind of go with it?
Yeah, well, for the documentation, I'll try to cover both. If I know that there's different terminology out there, I will kind of bridge that gap. When it comes to technical things, I've always seen myself as a translator from, engineering speak to the end user, and it's well, yeah. I mean, that's the key. I think, as Katie was saying, that's so key to everything.
Definitely. So a lot of us are the scrappy bunch. Do you have any tips on building customer education when you have limited resources, bandwidth, or headcount? A lot of the people who tune into these webinars are usually like a one-person show and are handling everything themselves. So do you have any tips on how to handle that?
Yeah, I mean, work with the resources you have the best you can. Understand the power of the resources and tools you have. Sometimes there are things we can do that we don't know we can do. Managing bandwidth is a big key because sometimes you have to say no, and sometimes you have to ask for help. Neither of which I'm great at, and I need to work on myself. Um, but having the right bandwidth to focus on the right things is key. Having the right tools for us in-app content, doing that through Pendo means we have less of a lag in sending it through to through a Jira ticket to an engineer to wait until it's coded and reviewed, and it could be 2 weeks before we see a copy change. And when we have something in Pendo, some in-app messaging, we can change that on the fly. If you're using a ticketing system, does it include a support site tool like Zendesk does, where we have the help center based on Zendesk, but that also drives our customer tickets. And video production is always a big one that people ask about because everybody has some kind of scrappiness when they're building videos. Keep in mind that when you're cutting a video or shooting a video, can you repurpose any of this material for other things? Finding the balance between a polished storytelling experience like a professional ad and marketing and the tutorials, they're all kind of different levels and have different requirements that that you may find acceptable. And so as you experiment, you'll recognize what works for your audience. It's pretty clear through various things that 2 to 3 minute video tutorials are very effective compared to a 20-minute walkthrough, because if you look at the engagement metrics on those, people just stop watching after a couple of minutes, and especially if they see that that progress bar is here and they still have to get to here and they have their boss waiting for that report, whatever it may be.
It's like you know me. I'm sure.
We're all in the same boat.
I don't do this, Adrian, I swear.
um, and another key with video is people don't recognize that audio is really important and sometimes more important than the video itself in the information you're conveying. There was a filmmaker, I don't know who it was, who would say, if your audio isn't good, people will say your film is too dark. Because they know something's wrong and it's uncomfortable and it's not right, but then they attribute it to something else. So a good cam, a good mic, those are important pieces to this kind of work. But I think mic is even more important because most cameras, whether you're using your laptop camera or your phone's camera, are good. Mics, not so much. So it's worth spending $100 or $200 on a good mic.
One question I had as you're talking about this is, how long would it take to put together a video? Because if you guys haven't seen Tony's videos, they're amazing. So definitely check them out. We might send some links to them later on. But yeah, because I'm thinking, is it the one-on-one that you have, which is more beneficial? That may take 20 minutes, but you film a video that may just take 5 minutes. But how long does it take out of your time to truly edit that and make it what it is that we're seeing?
Yeah, it depends on the type of video and on how many interruptions I have that day. It's yeah, it could be, a week-long project or 2-week-long project with a, contractor who knows how to shoot videos and put them
Mm-hmm.
together and edits for you. If you want to go that route, which is what we did for those, first kind of pilot videos that we did for Bitly, is let's push it to the limit, make it as good as we can with what we have. As I move forward and as we build these webinar recordings and our marketing webinars, you'll see different levels of that as we work within the time allotment we have and the projects that we have going on at any moment.
Right.
But yeah, again, everybody works hard to try to make that happen, so just aim for the best you can and recognize the limitations.
Right. So then would you say that video is probably one of the most effective ways to train people that you've seen?
It can be. It depends on the audience. And this is just my way of thinking of it through some of the experiences I've had. I see when I'm building any kind of documentation or video documentation, is I see there's kind of 3 types of customers who seek help. One of them will go to the documentation and read it. Another type is they will just dive in and get things done, and they'll look at the documentation of the video when they need an answer to something because they're stuck. That first group, they're going to read through the documentation. They're going to watch the whole video. They're just going to soak it in and then get in there and go with the knowledge they have. The third type of user, they just want to pick up the phone and get an answer. They're not going to bother with looking at documentation. Yeah.
I've dealt with all 3. I have all 3. No, that's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. Um, all right. So for moving on to the third topic, building content for customer education at Bitly. What are the different content mediums for Bitly's customer education program, and what would you say is the most engaging?
Yeah, email, of course, is probably the most common for any company. And we have that through marketing. We also have that driven through product. And as we're developing this, we really want to link the ideal is you link those two. So someone gets an email, they go into the app, that message, that experience kind of continues through there until they reach those goals that you're guiding them towards. And then those pieces are done through in-app copy, in-app messaging, through Pendo. We have our documentation on the Help Center. We have videos on the Help Center. We want to introduce some of those in product as well. And again, the engagement depends on that type of audience and what they're looking for. I think email is the big driver for a lot of it. And our engagement numbers are pretty good on that, better than the average. And the same is true with, like our NPS scores and what we see in the product itself. There's definitely engagement and a high level of satisfaction there. So it's hard to say which one is best. It probably depends on the product and the audience that you're striking at that particular moment.
Right. So I guess with like an email, would you just kind of throw everything into one? Here's a link to this, here's a document, here's a video, kind of pick your poison type of thing? Or how would you go about that?
Yeah, I really try to focus on 1, maybe 2 CTAs in any type of messaging. If you throw too much at people, we all get tons of emails. It's like, oh God, okay, that's more than 7 words. I'm moving on. There needs to be something obvious there, some action that you want them to take, and it has to be motivating in some way. Yeah.
Cool. All right. So we all know the one size fits all model doesn't work for training. How do you segment your audience for customer education, and how much is too much segmentation?
Yeah, this is something else that we're reevaluating. And again, probably common that you constantly reevaluate it and understand who your customers are. We have um, lots of free users who sign up every month. Like we're talking close to 1 million free users every month. And
Oh, wow.
like these free accounts, you want them to understand, okay, you're shortening a link and you're doing these little things, but there's so much more you can do. There are other features. And um, so understanding the groups within that segment, the segments within that group, um, is difficult. But again, you listen to customers, you do interviews and research. I look at support tickets a lot. You listen to sales calls and account management calls. Um, we're currently working on experiments to see which messages resonate with those different segments. Um, so there's lots of experimentation that does need to be done to understand what works. Um, and recognize when it comes to that first login experience, everyone's in the same boat. They're new to the product. They need to understand the basics there. And there are lots of things, regardless of segment, that you should just do, right? It's like, again, if the customer was sitting here, uh, whether it was someone from a mom and pop shop or someone from, a Fortune 100 company who's using the product, how do you get them started?
Right. So you mentioned that you kind of talk to customers, that you do look at support tickets. Do you kind of look at the support tickets and then say, actually, I think I'm going to reach out to this person and ask them a few questions? Or how do you go about that? Is it just out of a
Yeah,
hat or?
I haven't done that simply because of bandwidth
Yeah.
limitations. But it's great when I really love when our support team, someone from the support team reaches out to me with a question. They help write the knowledge-based content too and edit it and always have great suggestions based on what they're hearing. So I really rely on many people to be, the eyes and ears. And we also have a Slack channel for our company where anyone in the company, sales, marketing, account management, and support can ask questions of the engineer. So that's a great um, channel to monitor because you can see the nitty gritty from the engineering perspective and the basic problem from the customer perspective. And it's very helpful.
I like how you kind of mentioned that you like lean on the support team for some of that information. So everyone listening, you don't have to do it all alone, okay? Like you can lean on other people and kind of get more information that way. So this next question is actually one of my favorite questions. How can you structure your customer education programs so that you can adapt training to customers with different use cases, company sizes, industries, etc.? And how far do you segment your customers?
Yeah, give them options. Working with designers to get this right is really important. You want to present guidance that can be followed or it stays out of the way. Um, and that way you are providing assistance to the people who want it and will, click on that help button, will follow a guide, whatever the case is, versus the people who want to dive in and know where they can go to get help, make help prevalent somehow. Um, Usually in a profile menu or right on the page itself somewhere. Um, Teaching preschool actually gave me a great frame of mind for this because, preschool teaching is about setting up an environment that allows kids to learn and develop by exploring. Um, so as a teacher, you're providing a starting point and you're providing structure, and you change that environment every day depending on what your goals of development are for that day, and you provide guidance when it's needed. One of the hardest things for me was like stepping back and letting the kid explore. And if it came to, okay, they're going to break something, now you step in. And every time we learn something new, and this is true whether you're in preschool, kindergarten, or as an adult, you're gaining confidence and then therefore confidence through action by doing it. We do it just the way we do when we were kids. And so by setting up the UI in a way that lets people accomplish their goals without getting in their way, and helping them when needed, you set up all those possibilities. And then you identify those needs through segmentation, which is, again, constantly reevaluated. You never want to get comfortable. You want to keep growing. You want to keep questioning your methods. And again, experimentation is the best way to get to that.
I love how you tied this back to preschool. I think that was such a great reference. So something on that though, so do you ever encounter anybody who's not really the exploring type, who's willing to just like click and try to break things? And if so, how do you kind of get them to push them outside their comfort zone and just be like, yeah, just click around, figure it out. Like and if you have any questions, like reach out, anything like that.
I don't know that we have a way of identifying those people. It's like, that's where, when you're doing experiments and you're looking at engagement, when somebody drops off, you don't really know why they've dropped off. And reaching out to them, if you know who they are, is kind of would be disconcerting, I think. Like, hey, we noticed you were doing so, and then they feel like
I
they're
was stalking you.
yeah, exactly. So you don't want to go that route either. But hopefully through those other means and those other experiments and conversations, you're getting to that. But it is very difficult.
Yeah. So then how do you develop a product training strategy that covers a diverse range of topics for various levels of training?
Hmm. Well, first of all, by providing different formats, you're thinking about how to convey information, and what information you're conveying is going to be affected. So try to do at least a little bit of everything: the documentation, the video, guidance like tooltips or callouts in the product. And something I always think about too is again, checking your language. Very often we'll use language that on the back end, as product experts, we know. I mean, sometimes the way we speak to a product with our engineers is totally disconnected from a user experience. So we need to use language that customers will understand. To do that, you have to understand your audience.
Right.
Do all you can to make sure you're doing that. We're currently updating our dev site based on interviews with our own engineers, and the things we've seen from our dev customers with implementing APIs. That's another thing too. We ask our engineers, well, how does it work when you go to connect to someone's API? Keep in mind that if you're on a computer, you're a customer too. You're a customer of some type of product, usually the same type of product in some way that we're trying to convey, right? So pay attention to your own experiences and ask your coworkers about theirs, and pay attention, when your mom calls you and asks you how to do something on her iPhone. Those things inform, get back to basics. They inform how you should be providing information to customers.
Definitely back to the basics. I like that. All right. So going on to our fourth section today, the first question I have is, how do you keep customers engaged with product education?
So a lot of that has to do with, evaluating that journey and that story and that flow. So understanding what interactions they're performing, what are they reading, what are they clicking on, and what messages are displayed at any moment. And that reward aspect of accomplishing something. Hey, this is great. You've created your first link. You are on your way. That has a big impact. Through various experiments and through lots of research that's available on the internet, you can see that, giving someone a pat on the back is a way to increase engagement. It works. And then through UX research, you can see the bigger picture through those data points that the research pulls together. So not only do you get, the customer stories and experiences, but you get an aggregation of what works for them. Yeah.
I think something else you touched on right before we hopped on this webinar was that something I didn't even think to put together, but you're saying that videos, when you're actually showing your face and talking to them, people stay more engaged than just a video of you walking through something and talking maybe in the background.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, we've seen that through our video metrics.
And then another thing that I'm kind of noticing is a trend through some of the answers that you're giving is your lines of communication with whether it's internal conversations or whether it's with customers are wide open. Like you guys are constantly having conversations to kind of better everything holistically. And I think that's something super important to kind of touch on. And I'm so glad that you've been referencing that throughout this entire webinar. So then moving on to the next thing, how do you measure the success of your customer education program?
We do that through the basics as well, engagement with CTAs, customer retention, upgrades, and renewals. The way any company measures how they're succeeding. And, the small pieces that we perform add up to those larger pieces and those larger goals. So all the goals kind of come together. If you guide your customers into growth, respect and encourage them, they will use your product, they will spread the word, and you'll ultimately see growth. And we see those retention numbers go up when we do these things at our level, at the customer education level.
Just quick question on the retention level. What are you using in order to kind of measure that?
So our messaging tool, Pendo, also has metrics tools that are great for that. So we can see, week over week, month over month retention over extended periods of time. And we can separate our experiments, into cohorts. We can have the control group that doesn't see a message and one that does, and then see how it impacts those renewal rates. And it's great. It's great. It's an easy way to look at those quickly.
Right. So then what are the next steps or phases for Bitly's customer education program?
I think a lot of things we have out there, some of it is still from before we took on some of these initiatives. So, tying it back to that voice and tone that Tiffany's worked on, establishing that relationship constantly, always listening to customers, and then setting up more touch points. So we are working on a more expansive onboarding within the product, so we can establish kind of that seamless experience from email to in-app copy to in-app messaging, and really helping the customers understand that someone is right there with them. We are thinking about them as they find their way through the product.
Right. Awesome. No, thank you so much for sharing that information. So if you are ready, we can move on to the rapid fire. Are you ready?
All
Okay.
right, I'm ready.
I'm going to start with ones that came in first through the chat, and then we'll move into the ones that we have on our document. So
Okay.
let's see. Okay, so Robert asked, does Bitly have a new user onboarding curriculum? And if so, how do you spec that out?
Yeah, we're building that out now. As I said, we're kind of redoing it. So we're starting with the basics again, and really thinking about, what features people use and what they're interested in. So through experimentation, showing people different messages and understanding what they engage with first, we can kind of string those together in a way that makes sense. So it builds up to a positive experience.
Right. This next question is actually on how to say no. So is there a decision tree or any framework to help folks decide when or what things to say no in customer education?
You can see I've already pulled out all my hair. I wish I had the answer to that. It's difficult. It's difficult because I think part of the nature of someone in our role too is you want to do it all. You really
Right.
want to help in every way. And, so if you can hire 10 more people right on, that may be a good start. But it's difficult. I often rely on my leadership. So I will ask people, uh, due dates is a good question to ask. When do you need this? And the answer very often is, oh, well, when you get to it, I need a due date so
So
that I can figure
no,
out how to
never.
prioritize it. Yeah. So that's a good place to start. And then, yeah, really relying on your leadership, relying on your colleagues to have conversations. If you have competing priorities, bring those stakeholders together and talk about what might be more important at the time. And I've been fortunate; I haven't had to play, a referee role at Bitly. Everybody's really collaborative, and I think that's the most common case for people.
Right.
I hope.
Again, open line of communication. Every time you're speaking to leadership, you're speaking to engineering. I like that a lot. And I think that's something that I think lacks in some places with some certain groups. So I think that's huge. All right. Robert has another question. Does Bitly have a collection of specific different user personas? And if so, at what point do you think your general customer education curriculum will diverge to start to speak to those specific personas?
Yeah, that's a great question.
That was a mouthful, Robert, but I love the question.
Yeah, again, we introduced these new self-service plans last year. So prior to that, our customers were enterprise level customers and doing things, shortening links at scale and sending them out through various means like SMS and email and really focused on security and understanding, how Bitly is so good at that. And so, yeah, so as we introduced these self-service levels and started getting these new segments in, um, it suddenly introduced us to millions of users that we have to understand. And so, again, we're in progress of kind of, we have, the buckets that we came up with last year. We're, reevaluating those now and figuring out, okay, how do we get these other customers engaged? You start doing the experiments, you start doing uh, the work, and then you see what impact it has, and you follow the customer's lead. We are building out that onboarding. We are creating segments and building out messaging for those particular segments. And over the next year, we're going to be doing quite a lot, and I'm really excited about it. So stay tuned, Robert.
Okay, so for the next section of rapid fire questions, this has to do with building customer education. The first question is what not to do when building a customer education program from scratch with a one person or small team?
Wow. Yeah, don't try to do it all. Again, uh, start with the basics and figure out what those priorities are. Yeah, I mean, I keep going back to those basics, don't I? It's like, it's like,
That's true for everything in life. I swear. I hear that all the time. Like, yeah, just go back to the basics. And I'm like, yeah, it makes sense.
yeah. And when you are the only person or a small team, focus on your accomplishments too. Really pay attention to not only did I do this, but it had an impact, or if it didn't have an impact or the impact you expected, um, then where do we adjust? It's that learning. I actually like working within constraints because you can really focus on, okay, what can I do? And it's a great experience, a great feeling when you get to that point. So what not to do? Don't ignore your customers. Don't think you have all the answers. Sometimes we build a product. It's kind of that classic business mistake of building a product and not having the customers and then looking for customers for it, as opposed to understanding what customers need and then building the product accordingly.
Right. That was a fantastic answer. I like that. Okay, so we also do in-app walkthroughs, docs, and education. How can I leverage other resources to do it all?
Hmm. Yeah, rely on your team. You know, having the right tools, which I talked about initially, would really help with that. If you don't have a good video editing tool, and it doesn't have to be an expensive one, you don't need Final Cut Pro. A lot of video software has many of the same tools, and you don't need the uber fancy stuff. So yeah, it's did I answer that question? I feel like I lost my way on that one.
I don't know who
Sorry.
asked that, but if you're on here and you know that question, if that was an answer, then let us know.
I'm
One
sorry
question
about that.
I don't know. One question I had was, did you teach yourself all this like video editing, or was it something like you took a class on, or how did you kind of get to where you are now?
I did do a lot of it on my own through experimentation, my own level of experimentation. Um, but yeah, I mean, now you can look on YouTube, you can find documentation to help you learn things so quickly. There are classes everywhere, online and in person, although these days maybe not so much in person. Um, but yeah, it's really a matter of just, getting those right tools really help.
Right. Okay,
Yeah.
so the next section of questions has to do with onboarding. What are your top 3 customer onboarding tips?
Um, encourage. Be a colleague as if you're sitting right there next to them. I mean, I really believe in making it a personable experience. The way people feel about using your product will impact what they do, and it will impact your business. So it's really important to pay attention to that.
Yeah. Robert has another question, which I think is fantastic. So, are there any resources, websites, books, etc., that you would recommend to up your game regarding customer education?
Mm. Uh,
Right?
yeah. I mean, if you look at the tools that are available, like Pendo and its competitors, like for video editing, Final Cut Pro, the high end, but you have tools like Camtasia, which work really well and have so many editing tools built in. Um, those will help you get there. And their blogs, their websites. If you have a free trial for any customer education tool, by going through the motions or at least reading their tutorials, you'll understand through the experience that they have. Again, it's talking with, in essence, a colleague who is more experienced in this arena. So if you look at those things and kind of filter out the sales pitches, you get the information and the experience that will help you understand how to do this in a good way, in an effective way.
I'm not gonna lie, that kind of blew my mind. I never thought to go to another website just to see how they're training customers, which would be me. Like that is amazing to actually think about, to get their experience, how they're doing it, using video, using documentation, and kind of marrying all of those together. I think that was great. So, what is the best way to determine deliverables, including webinars, videos, and reference guides?
Yeah, delivery. I mean, you want to make it available as much as possible. That's where I kind of go back to letting customers explore. If you push things at customers, I think all of us, there's an immediate resistance, like, whoa, sales pitchy there. Let's, pull that back a little bit. And by removing the sales pitch, and again, working towards a partnership, it makes a difference. So yeah, that's the direction I would go in that question. Just generally, I feel like I'm repeating some of my answers, which is why I'm hesitating. It's like, oh, I'm going to go
No,
back to
don't worry.
basics.
A lot of these kind of like merge together. So it's so okay. So then, how do you maintain content? So like product updates, UI updates, deprecated features.
Yeah, luckily working on the product team, I'm up to date on the changes that are coming and what happens in the UI or the product itself. Our customer support team, I rely on them a lot to rewrite articles and update screenshots. If you change something in the UI and you have the old screenshots in there, that's a problem. It becomes a little more difficult with video tutorials, because then you're talking about editing a video in a way that, how do you replace a screenshot or even something someone is talking about in voiceover without cutting the video in such a way that it's kind of choppy and doesn't make
Right.
sense and there's no flow. That gets tricky. And it's one of those constraints I was talking about earlier where you have to get creative and think about how to do this best, whether it's something that flashes on the screen saying, hey, this changed, or whether it's just cutting a piece out. It's difficult to do for video.
Right. I was about to say, I would just scrap it, redo it, but
That's
that
true
would
too.
take,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So these last couple of questions come from delivering training. So how to get customers to actually watch product education videos?
Yeah. Um, Engaging with videos, if you're targeting that right type of customer who wants to watch videos, um, giving them access to them. So do they have a way of accessing those from the product, from the help center easily? You go to our homepage on the help center and there is a video section. People who are attracted to that will jump right into it. And other things like the knowledge base and in-app messaging can be combined in that you provide links for when people want to know more. So you give them that brief explanation of a feature, but then I try not to use learn more, which is everywhere. So, it's like read the help article on how to do this, something more elaborate so they understand exactly what they're getting when they click that button.
Hmm.
I think generally it's, people know when you click learn more, you're going to get a help article of some sort. But I think it helps again to use the right language, and then it might encourage people to click that information more and get that information that'll help them do the job better.
Right. Yeah, I think that was a great answer. And honestly, it kind of tied back to the language that you're using when you're writing those things. Like learn more is definitely something that I kind of don't click on. So, but if you wrote it differently, I probably would.
I'm
All
making a
right.
note of that.
Right. All right. So, do you integrate your training, KB, and community to enhance and streamline customer learning experience? And if so, what does it look like and what content is delivered in which model?
Yeah, we don't have a full integration. There are pieces here and there that connect certain dots, but that's what we're doing in building this new onboarding experience. And I mean, just from the initial steps we've taken and seeing the impact it has, it's like, yeah, it's important to get those things together, but again, to string them together in a way so that it's a seamless experience, um, and people always feel like they're moving forward and towards their goals and accomplishing their goals.
Right. Well, awesome. Well, Tony, we are just about out of time. Thank you so much for joining us today and kind of giving us some tips on and insight on your customer product education. So, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It's
Um,
been a blast.
Thank you. And then for everyone who's registered, we'll be sending out this recording today, so be on the lookout for that. And of course, everybody have a great day and hope to see you next time.
All right. Thanks so much, Monica.
Of course, take care.
Bye.
Bye.